what does technology impact in music? From my vantage point, the biggest thing that technology impacts is the recorded music format. 30 years ago, before Spotify, before streaming, all music was like a physical good with your music baked into it. And today, the format is digital streaming. So it feels like every piece of recorded music ever lives on my phone. People will complain that maybe that does devalue music because you don't have as many people needing to buy CDs, but it is a pretty big unlock of bringing it to more and more people. Back then, people thought that recording music at all was a bad idea because it would make people not go to the symphony. And they were wrong. I would hate for there to be an AI music world and a non-AI music world, both because it doesn't really make sense. That's just worse for consumers. Consumers want to go to one place. And in a world where these things are separate, ultimately the music ecosystem is smaller and less valuable to people. The future of music is not going to build itself.
Hi, Mikey. Welcome to the Coral Capital podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you so much for doing this. I feel like you've been a very, very busy person the last few days. I should start off by saying congratulations on the Series C fundraising. You guys raised, is it $250 million?
That's right. Yes. And thank you.
And was that like an easy raise? Was it harder to put together? How was that experience like?
I don't know if I have a great benchmark for this, just given that the last couple of rounds were done not really running a process. And so, but look, in some sense, it's like a little bit nerve-wracking trying to raise a lot of capital. In another sense, it's like it's a reflection of the hard work that the whole team put in here. And it's amazing to be able to show that to people and talk about it, and get to sing the praises of everything that the team has built. So it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah, 100 million total users, and I think it was $200 million in annual revenue. No small feat. So congratulations on, everything that you guys have accomplished so far.
Thank you. Yeah. I think people are sometimes skeptical about music, and sometimes people think that the music ecosystem is small. And I think music is just so special, and it has such a special place in people's lives and in people's hearts and in every culture. And so it can be so big. And so maybe people are surprised by the 200 million number, but in some way, it actually shouldn't be surprising if you think about how important music is in your life compared to other forms of media, how well developed your tastes are in music compared to other forms of media. And so in some sense, we think this shouldn't be all that surprising. It is, of course, the product of a lot of hard work.
Right. Yeah. The music industry is a massive one. So yeah, I guess not surprising. And I'm sure there's still so much room for you guys to grow into.
We certainly hope so, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to start from the very beginning and get a better understanding, especially for the listeners, on who you are, I guess, as a person, as a founder, and also how you ended up kind of building in the intersection of music and AI with Suno. Can you kind of walk us through that, your background
Sure.
And all of that?
So I have been playing music since I'm 4 years old. I have two older brothers. I actually kind of insisted that they let me start playing music a little earlier because I just, saw my two older brothers doing that. And I played in a lot of bands in high school and in college, and I loved every minute of it. I think some of the most fun I've ever had, is playing music with my friends. Actually, it's an incredible feeling. I play piano and I play bass. I started piano when I was 4, and I picked up a bass maybe when I was 11 or 12. But I'm only okay, if I'm being honest. Like, I play a ton. I was okay. But I was not, I could see people much, much more talented than I was. And I think I had other talents. And so actually after college, I left music. The feelings of how fun and enjoyable and fulfilling it is to make music with your friends, though, are a huge inspiration for what it is that we're doing and have really shaped, I think, where the product has gone and will continue to go. But the real answer is we thought it would be too hard to build this product. At the beginning, we thought we would need 100 times more compute power to make good music. And we started as more of a general purpose music understanding tool. We had some research breakthroughs, and eventually we figured it out, and we threw away the old business, and we said, like, this is the thing that we want to do. As soon as we figured out how to do it, we would stay up late at night making these models make music, and we couldn't help ourselves. And we said, like, this is the company that we need to build. And I think that some founders of other companies it's are almost like ashamed of telling like the real story. I have no problem saying that we thought we would start a different company because we thought this would be too hard.
While you guys were still at Kensho?
It was like right after we left Kensho, we knew we loved audio. We knew that in the world of machine learning and AI, audio is actually quite far behind. And there's no intrinsic reason why that has to be the case. I can make some arguments around why that's the case. I don't know if they're true or not. It has a lot to do, in my humble opinion, with a lot of research in machine learning comes from what the big labs could sell ads based on. So it's like machine learning research came out of Google and Facebook, and because Google's selling you ads based on what you read, and Meta's selling you ads based on what you look at, and no one's really selling you ads based on what you listen to. And so there was never a lot of research, and so there wasn't a lot of progress. And we said, like, well, what if we just started to do it? Like, somebody's going to do it. And yes, we thought it would be too hard. And yes, and we're not particularly ashamed of that. And after we figured it out, we said, oh, this is the company that we want to build. Of course, this is the company that we want to build. And so we very quickly got a product out. It was a Discord bot. We saw what Midjourney was doing and how many people loved Midjourney. It's something that I got wrong. I thought we would be on Discord for a really long time. And in some sense, the rest is history. As soon as we put it out to the world and we saw how much people really, really loved it, we knew we were onto something. We knew that this isn't just like a fad or some sort of like, I don't know, flash in the pan or a party trick, that this can be something really, really big.
Was there a moment where you felt like, whether it was the first time you guys played a music that was built on, whatever was Suno or whatever it was called back then, or like something technologically where you're like, okay, wow, like this might actually work? Was there a moment that you recall?
There were certain times when, before we released anything, and we would have these things spit out. At the beginning, I think we could only do 12 seconds at a time. So it would spit out, that's not a song. That's not even like a small piece of a song. I remember a couple of these and being like, like, actually, this is like, we thought it wasn't possible. Okay, we did it. We thought it was possible. It's like, your ears have to be a little bit forgiving, but you're like, if you're willing to look past like the very obvious discrepancies, and if you go back and you find some of these original samples, like in many ways they're terrible, but I remember just staying up late doing that in my co-founder's dining room, just like, and it was just fun. I think that was like actually one of the biggest points here, is that we saw it much more as a tool, much more than a tool, rather, from day one. It was like, this is something that we are doing because we enjoy doing it, and we hypothesize that people will also enjoy doing it if we can make improvements here. And it's not just like, this is the most expedient tool that I have to produce this piece of music and then abandon the tool because I'm done using it.
Right. And the co-founders that you started this off with, you met at Kensho, from my understanding. And I've seen, I don't know if it's gone like viral, but I feel like there's now this like Kensho Mafia of folks that are building really incredible companies in AI, including yourself, of course. I have a list somewhere. It's like, Open Evidence, Daniel Nadler, LangChain, Harrison Chase, Thinking Machine, Sam Schleifler. The list goes on. Is there something that was, looking back, like special about that place, whether it's the talent that they attracted, whether it was the innovation that was happening? Because Kensho wasn't like a big company, right? I think it was bought out for like $500 million by S&P. You guys were working on, natural language processing for finance, which I guess was niche at the time. But like, what was special about that place that has now turned into like this mafia kind of gang?
It's funny. I will tell you, I'm calling in from Suno headquarters, which is actually the original Kensho office. We went back to the mothership, so to speak, because there's a lot of good juju in this building. But I think a lot of it is that it's like clearly an entrepreneurial bunch. And I think a lot of this is the culture that Daniel set. Daniel was the founder of Kensho and now the founder of Open Evidence, about talent just being so important. And I feel like incredibly lucky to have that modeled in a way that you can see it, because when you see how powerful it is to be surrounded by such great talent, it really like raises your standards, it raises your ambition. And so if you force me to pick one thing, it's just that, right? I don't think that was a bunch that had a particularly strong affinity for financial services. We all thought it was really interesting, but it wasn't like, this is my life's passion. And you can see that Daniel's doing something in healthcare. Harrison's doing something in LLM infrastructure. We're doing music, right? So like, I think it was just an innate desire to like build things from scratch. And by the way, like I learned a ton at Kensho. I consider Daniel an extremely close friend. But having a group of people who are all entrepreneurial isn't necessarily the right way to run a big organization. That can cause problems.
Right. How do you guys hire, by the way? And you guys are based in Boston or Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm curious, one, whether you've gotten pushback initially from investors being like, you guys should be based in SF. That's where the talent is. And two, like what the pros and cons have been about attracting talent, being a startup that's based there.
We've definitely gotten pushback. Definitely heard we don't invest in Boston companies. Definitely heard we don't invest in Boston consumer companies, and that's fine if you want to think that way. I think my hiring philosophy, I think, is largely borrowed from Daniel's, which is like everything is downstream of who you are working with, and your ability to solve the next problem is like 99% who you have around the table, and so really trying hard to maintain a really, really high bar, even as your needs shift, to make sure that you maintain that really high bar. I think, so we actually have 3 offices. We have Cambridge, New York, and LA. And I feel very lucky to be starting this company after COVID, where we don't have to make this weird decision. Are we remote? Are we in person? Are we remote? Are we in person? And just to be a company that's in office. I think that there are actually some benefits to not being headquartered in San Francisco, and to have the space, the headspace that you need to build the thing that you believe in. Like, we have a vision of what the future should or could look like, and we want to build toward that and not be immediately pulled in the direction of whatever is interesting or topical right now. And the space to do that is actually a really important luxury, I would say. And my anecdotes here, I would give 2 anecdotes to kind of highlight that. One would be, I remember when GPT-4 came out. So it's been a minute, and I was on the phone with a friend in San Francisco, and he said, "Hey, I gotta go. There's an emergency hackathon for GPT-4." And I remember thinking to myself, like, this can't possibly be an emergency. Like, I know that this is probably a big deal, but this can't possibly be an emergency. And I think it's very hard to appreciate that when you're like totally steeped in it. Or another example would be the weekend that Sam Altman got fired and rehired to OpenAI. We had just a regular weekend. We weren't glued to Twitter. We were just like, and it is okay if you find out the news 3 hours later than your friends did because you're not glued to Twitter. Maybe that's actually a positive. And so it's not, I think San Francisco is amazing. We have people there. There's an incredibly talented group of people who live there, an incredibly entrepreneurial spirited group of people who live there. But I do think that there are some distinct positives about not being headquartered there.
I'm in the bucket of, I don't think you need to be in SF to build an AI company. I think as long as, you're building on some sort of talent edge. And I think Cambridge has a ton of talent and researchers, of course. But I think one of the fears that investors have is like, okay, if you're not based in SF, or in Japan's case, like if you're not based in Tokyo, then you're not building to the speed, or you're not under the same amount of pressure that some of the other startups are. And I think maybe that falls into to what you were also talking about, where, not being in that bubble also allows you to be heads down and actually focus on like what you're building and your vision. But it's also important to make sure that you're building quickly enough. How do you like balance that? Or have you thought about that while building Suno at all?
Oh, I think about that a lot. It's like, where does the motivation come from? And it has to come from somewhere else if you are not living in the pressure cooker that is, running after the shiniest thing. And I think the shortest description of the answer here is like a mission-driven company. This is a company of people who really deeply believe in the future of music that we are trying to build, and who are, willing to dedicate every free moment of their lives to do that. And like, that's what is amazing. And, as an example, today Spotify Wrapped came out, which is like, Spotify will digest everything that you've done over the past year. And like people are instantly trying to, like, we are so into music here. People are like, trying to peep into other people's Spotify raps and like, what was your Spotify age? And what was your, and so I think that when you have a group of people who are so motivated to the actual mission of the company, you don't need to have the pressure cooker environment to perform at your best, to work your hardest, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, I would say for the long haul, that is probably a healthier intrinsic motivation.
Mm. I also wanted to get into the tech that you guys are building too. And Suno is built on a transformer model. And I think you've mentioned that you're using open source text community as a reference point for figuring out how to tokenize the audio. Could you walk us through Suno's technical approach? Like, what's worked well so far? What are some of the challenges that you guys are still facing right now?
Sure. You said a lot of the technical approach. So we will tokenize audio, which is take a long piece of audio or a WAV file. It's just a waveform, and use another model that we train to cut it up into little discrete pieces, the same way you would just look at a piece of text, let's say in English, and use words as the discrete little pieces. That is not given to you for free in audio. You need a model to do it because audio is a continuous signal and it's sampled very quickly. It's sampled at 40 or 50,000 times per second. And so a whole song would be totally unmanageable, let alone an album, if you needed to consider every single point in time. So we use a model to do that. And then after that, it's a fairly vanilla / state of the art, like there's so much in the open source about what works and what doesn't work, and different things work in text and different things work in audio. But after that, it really is a fairly vanilla transformer. And I think a lot of the edge for us has been focusing on exactly where do we want to innovate and exactly where do we not want to innovate. Because we are a relatively small team, we can't reinvent every single wheel. And so I would say for us, like, one of the things that I think luckily worked very well is our focus on, we always wanted to make songs, whole songs. I said that original clip, we would make 12 seconds at a time, but we didn't want to release that. People want to hear a whole song. And so we focused on making a whole 2.5-minute song, sacrificing audio quality. So you would hear like even a little bit of our song and you would know that that's Suno because it didn't have great audio quality and you needed to have more forgiving ears. And I think a lot of other companies focused on how do we get really crisp 10-second pieces and we'll make our users string them together. But a song is a story and you need to be able to tell the whole story, even if it doesn't sound perfect. And eventually we figured out how to make it sound much, much better. And that was a bunch of research. But I think that was in hindsight, a really important advantage of ours of like, we actually understand that a song is meant to tell a story and we need to give people the means to make that entire story instead of kind of stringing it together. In terms of what's challenging, I think on the modeling side, we care about three things. We care about the audio quality. Does it sound like crisp and beautiful? We care about the song quality. Do we make songs that are well composed, catchy, stick in your head, make you feel a certain way? And the last thing we care about is control. How easy do we make it to go from an idea to the actual piece of music? And the control bit is not a problem to solve. It is a forever problem. It is something that we will be working on 20 years from now. And it's because the workflows that you might want to use to think of a song and articulate it and then have that actually come to life, these are as much product questions as they are machine learning questions. And so it's, do I listen to the text prompt? That's one thing. Can I hum a song and have it beautifully turn into a well-composed thing? That would be another thing. Can I turn on the microphone on my phone and beatbox and have that come to fruition? That would be another thing. Can I use the touchscreen on my phone and start tapping it? Like, everything is going to eventually come out, and I joke, but it's like half serious that what I actually want is a Vision Pro app because I want to be able to conduct. And well, we don't have that now and we're not working on that now, but I hope that one day we get the opportunity to work on it. And so I think these are the things that are going to be challenging. They will be fun, but they will be challenging for at least a decade.
Right. I feel like you guys have iterated and built really quickly. I mean, if I remember the first version of Suno that I touched, I think maybe it was like 2023 is like when V2 came out. And now it's like, it looks very, very different. Have you guys baked in the way that the model or the way that the user interface is built so that you can get usage data or like at the way that the platform is being used in order to iterate on like future versions of like how you guys should be building it out? Like how have you guys built out that model to like learn from your users and figure out what's built next?
It's a great question. The answer is a little, and you don't want to over engineer your product to collect data because then you sacrifice the usability of your product. And ultimately, the whole goal here is to delight our users. But as an example, when you hit create, you don't get one song, you get two. Originally, you would get two because the songs weren't good enough and we were just trying to increase the likelihood that you would enjoy one of them. Now the songs have gotten better. And it is a bit more of a data collection paradigm where you have two songs that our models think are both equally good. And if a user, through the course of listening to one song a bunch of times, giving a thumbs up to one song and not the other, sharing one song and not the other, remixing, all these different signals that you might get. If a user tells us that one of those is better than the other, now we actually have signal to teach our models. You thought both of these were the same quality. We're telling you one is better than the other. This is the type of data that you can use reinforcement learning on to make your models better. And so you want to be very subtle with how you introduce this into your product because you really, at the end of the day, the goal is to delight users. And so, we don't want this to look like a data collection platform that would not delight our users. But if in subtle ways, we definitely do stuff like that.
That's the other thing too, though, right? Like when we talk about AI, I feel like hallucination is brought up a lot as a bug, but I feel like when it comes to music or creativity, some of the magic happens when you're not pattern matching or you're not trying to build exactly what is intended for. So how does the team think about the line between like what is an error or what the model shouldn't be doing versus what's the creative expression component of it? Like how is that thought through? I don't even know
it's a great question. I don't know if we have necessarily principles here, but we live in such a different domain from the average LLM where there are no right answers in music. And that's amazing. That gives us latitude to push boundaries and experiment and make weird stuff sometimes because, like you said, that hallucination, if it sounded good, it was good. There's no wrong in that hallucination. And so that's actually extremely freeing, I think. As an example, a workflow we learned from our users that we then developed into the product, our users would kind of hack the prompt box to get the model to mumble. And so it would kind of sing, but it wouldn't sing words. It would sing like gibberish, basically. But the thing that was amazing that we learned from our users is that when the model sings gibberish, the flow is incredible because it's not constrained by language. It's just like it came out beautiful gibberish. And so the workflows that we learned that people would do is they would make the models kind of sing gibberish. The flow would be amazing. The melodies would be amazing. And then people will backward write lyrics to fit that flow. It's like a totally backward way of making music, except it produces really beautiful music. And so it's just like, is that a bug that the model can mumble? Sure. Is it also an amazing feature that gets used by a lot of songwriters? Absolutely. And so I don't mean to disagree with the premise of the question, but they can be both at the same time in our domain.
Right. Very cool. I also wanted to talk about Japan because we're based out here, and I feel like Suno has gotten a lot of attention here too. I've been following some of the X posts. I think you guys have close to 1 million reviews on like Google Play. We even did I forgot if it was an AI hackathon or like an AI learning event with some of our founders and employees of our portfolio companies. And one of the surveys that we sent out beforehand was, what AI product are you using that you're excited about? And I think Suno came up multiple times in that survey too. So I'm curious, one, if you can share, how big is the user base or traction that you're seeing in Japan? Are there any interesting trends specific to the region that you're seeing that you're not seeing in the US or Europe, for example?
It's a great question. We have a pretty big user base in Japan. I don't think this is particularly surprising. Japan is technologically and culturally forward in general, but I think in particular, at the nexus of music and technology particularly forward. And so like I'm not sure this is all that surprising in hindsight. We don't do a giant amount of marketing in Japan, but it's not surprising that these things get picked up. We also run a lot of songwriters camps in Japan, and so we'll sponsor them, but basically a lot of songwriters will come and they will write songs together, as is done usually, but using Suno kind of as the basis for a lot of the workflows. And I think some of our most successful ones have actually been in Tokyo, and it's because there's a lot more openness around these technologies. I'll tell you, just having seen this happen in the United States, people will come in a little skeptical if you're a professional songwriter. You will leave the songwriting camp extremely not skeptical and in love with the tool. And in our experience, that initial skepticism is just much, much lower. And so it's like quite heartwarming to see. In Japan, the initial skepticism is much, much lower. I don't know if I have any like particular trends that are different in Japan than they are in the US or Europe. We knew kind of from day one that this should be a big thing in Japan.
Would you say, like, ranking wise, would Japan rank like second or third after the US, or?
It is certainly up there. It is certainly one of the biggest geographies. Certainly, if you normalize by per capita, it might even be the biggest, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
No worries. Yeah, because I think Japan is the second largest recorded music market globally. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's up there. And also we have this very interesting oshikatsu culture, which is, these like super passionate super fans who I think drive an estimated $23 billion economy, and they spend around $1,600 a year on their favorite artists. And even back in the day, I think this has, tweaked a little bit as music has become more digitized and we've seen platforms like Spotify come about. But back in the day, it's like the CD market used to be so big in Japan. I think even now it's like 1/3 of the global kind of physical music market. So like CDs, vinyls are coming from Japan because people are willing to pay like $30 plus for a CD, and not just buy one, but actually buy like tens or hundreds in order to support their favorite artists. And I think you've talked about how superfan are like one part of monetization that you think can be exciting or more exciting in music, and AI can kind of play a bigger role in that. Can you expand on that and share a little bit about how you see that future playing out?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is a huge focus for the company. And so if I take a giant step back, I think that there are a couple of trends in music. One trend is, what does technology impact in music? And from my vantage point, the biggest thing that technology impacts is the recorded music format. And so you mentioned lots of people are buying CDs. So, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before Spotify or before streaming, all music was like a physical good with your music baked into it, right? And I remember going to the CD store. It was Sam Goody here, and you would go and you buy CDs. And in fact, behind me, I have a 1920s record player, right, that you have to hand crank, and it's amazing to listen to. And today, we feel like the format is digital streaming. So it feels like every piece of recorded music ever lives on my phone. That's what it feels like because I have Spotify. And that is a huge unlock for consumers. Way more music is available to way more people because of that. And people will complain that maybe that does devalue music because you don't have as many people needing to buy CDs, but it is a pretty big unlock of bringing it to more and more people. And so you bring it to more and more people, but you do maybe commoditize it a little bit more. And so when I think about the trend of where things need to go, bringing stuff to more and more people, that is happening. But how do we upvalue music? How do we give people the really engaging experiences around music so it is less commodified? And when I think about what super fandom can be, it doesn't have to be early access to merchandise or early access to concert tickets. Like, how do we get super fandom to be a daily activity so that the super fans of any artist can feel that really valuable interactive experience daily or almost daily? And in that lens, I think about what is the future format of music. It's not just like a lot more music made by AI that you're going to stream in the same way. That would be a fairly uninspired future. I think about it, the future format of music is interactive music. It is music that you play with, not music that you play. And so when I imagine the future, my favorite artist, or whatever, one of my favorite artists, I will pick up my phone and they will have released an interactive album and I will start to play with it. I will first listen to it and then maybe I'll get to take some samples and make my own music from that. Or maybe I will get to cover the song and make it my own somehow. Maybe there's a missing verse that I get to fill in somehow. All of these different workflows. And I will feel like I am co-creating with that artist. And that will be an amazing feeling. It's the same feeling that I talked about earlier of like, the most fun I've ever had is making music with my friends. I also think it is the highest form of flattery. It is the most engaging form of super fandom. It is quite obvious to me that people will want to pay a lot of money for that. And if we can make super fans not this niche thing that only exists in little pockets, but it's something that billions of people do every single day, that is ultimately how you make it, let's say, fulfill its full potential of what I think what super fandom should be. And so I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow. I think a lot about this format thing, and I'm quite certain that that is where the future goes.
Mm. Do you think some of what you described, or even the creation and collaboration of music, just generally speaking, is going to trickle into more physical spaces as well? I guess in Japan or in Asia, karaoke boxes are still like a really big thing, or doing in-person concerts. VTubing concerts are like a huge thing too. But how do you see like the way AI is going to be used in those like more physical experiences that we have with artists today?
A lot. So I think that while we are trying to make digital experiences be really valuable and interactive, still the most valuable and interactive music experiences are real life experiences. And I still think that there's a lot of room, even with what we have now, in IRL music to get better. I think a lot about, I don't know if you're familiar with the Sphere. It's this big concert venue outside Las Vegas, right? And it's like, if you've seen a concert at the Sphere, right? Like there are concerts, and then you go to the Sphere and you realize like there are concerts and there are concerts, and the Sphere is like a totally different experience, even though, yes, it's a concert. And so
right.
I imagine again the following. It's whoever your favorite artist is, they've released this album, their fans are playing with it. There's this whole ecosystem of derivative content. It's effectively like fan fiction. The fans are playing with it and creating their own worlds. Now imagine that artist comes to play a show in whatever city, and they pick their favorite version of one of the songs that their fan made, who is at that concert, because they know that fan is at their concert, and they play that song. How incredible will that be for not only that fan, for the entire audience to know that that artist is playing a version of the song written or adapted in that city by a resident of that city? Like, I think that is amazing. And that is like what music is meant to be. And so that is deepening the engagement at that live event compared to what it used to be. And so I think that there will be more and more stuff like that.
Mm. Yeah, I guess like being able to interact with fans more seamlessly because they're more entwined with the music and like collaborating with the music, and not just engaging more passively or, just engaging when they're at the concert. Yeah, that's very interesting. I also wanted to talk about two big topics that I feel like have been kind of making the headwinds recently. The first one is about Xania Monet. For those who don't know, she's the first known AI artist to earn enough radio airplay to debut on the Billboard chart. And she's also secured a multi-million-dollar record deal with Hallwood Media, who's, I think, also an investor of Suno. I think it's one thing to talk about the potential of AI artists or the potential of AI music, and another thing to kind of see it playing out in real life, along with all of like the reactions and the reception of the general, I guess, public. I guess, what are your initial thoughts just like seeing this as an observer?
I have a lot of thoughts here. I think the music is really good and really interesting. And I think that it's actually a really good example of people will worry that the ability for more people to create music and to have quote unquote ghost artists will kind of depersonalize music. And then you realize that this is an artist who has been a poet her whole life, who is writing from a deep and personal place and has these amazing lyrics. And when you listen to the music, that really comes out and it hits you in really powerful way. A lot of those songs. And to think like it makes me quite sure that we're not about to depersonalize music. You are about to grow your ability to have a connection through music to more and more people. In this case, to a very talented poet who, didn't have the musical training. I see that as a positive. I understand that music and technology have a checkered past. I understand that people felt exactly the same way when tools were developed and distributed that you could make music on your laptop instead of at a giant console in a studio. And that made 13-year-olds able to produce music in their bedroom. And people said, that's not real music. And then you fast forward, 20 years. And now it's just accepted that every piece of music you listen to is created on a computer because it's just a much easier way to produce music. I think the thing to be humble about here is that when I think back to whatever it was 30 years ago when digital production was coming out and people are a little hesitant, is it real music? You produced it on your laptop. It makes new genres of music. So there's like electronic dance music is something that would never have been possible without that. And that's really interesting. And then everybody said at the time, like, okay, fine, maybe it's real music, maybe it's not real music, but like, I'm never going to go to a concert just to see somebody push play on their laptop. Like, that's ridiculous. And if you look, the biggest concerts today are somebody pushing play on their laptop. They're EDM festivals. And I think it's important to be humble about that because nobody really foresaw that. And there's something special about what that type of music does to groups of people. And that is something to lean into and not to be afraid of. And so I think I'm like very open-minded about where all of that goes. And I think it's amazing that in the case of Xania Monet, like somebody new is able to connect with a lot of people who find that music really potent.
And what's crazy to me is like most people don't even know it's an AI artist, right? Or that the poet Talisha Nikki Jones, I think is her name, is actually like behind the lyrics. People just think it's like another R&B artist, and they're like, "Oh, is it actually AI?" Like, I feel like that's also, yeah. I mean, even when we listen to music today, like we don't think about like what's auto-tune and what was built on this and that. It's just like, okay, is it good music or not? And is it getting fan engagement or not? I feel like is what we think about.
I think that's right. And so, I think it's important to keep an open mind about who connects with what and to pay attention very closely what happens there. The other reason I have the record player behind me is that back then people thought that recording music at all was a bad idea because it would make people not go to the symphony. And they were wrong. Recording music at all was a great idea. It brought music to way more people and it made way more people want to go to the symphony.
Mm. In the case of, I guess there's going to be multiple cases, but in a case like Xania Monet, I think there's a lot of questions about who's actually going to be making money and how that distribution is going to look like. Is it going to be, the model or the platform provider, Suno in this case? Is it going to be the poet that's, creating the lyrics? Is it going to be the artist whose music the models are trained on? What does that actually look like in practice?
I think it's hard to know right now. The way it works right now, we don't make any money. We make Nikki's $10 a month subscription. And so I think that new economic models are probably going to have to be built around some of this stuff. And that will require partnership from lots of different parties. It's a little hard to know right now.
Mm. And I guess that's the second thing I wanted to talk about was the news. And, there's a lot of movement happening with record labels. And it was recently announced that WMG or Warner Music Group signed a deal with you guys and is going to allow artists to be able to release their work to be used for training. And for me, I mean, I'm not a professional in this space, but it feels very different from what we saw happening back in like the Napster or Spotify days versus now, to the extent that, whatever you can talk about, what are your observations about what you're seeing in terms of how the industry is changing, reacting, the deals and the partnerships that are happening?
I think if you compare what things look like today to what they looked like a year ago, it looks far warmer and more optimistic, actually, on all sides. And I think that makes me really optimistic about the future because a lot can change in a year, and a year is not that long. And if you read a lot of the stuff we've put out with Warner closely, this is not a deal. This is a partnership. And that is the point. And I've said this, from day one, that there is so much more to do together than fighting one another. there's such a big music world to build together beyond training. If you look, we're also going to be doing things with their artists. We're going to be developing more of both the super fandom and the interactive music ideas. You might have even seen those words appear in earnings calls from major record labels. Like, these aren't ideas that have come about just from one person or from thin air. I think so, and that makes me really excited because I think there's a few bad futures that I want to avoid, and one of them is that there are basically two worlds of music. Like, I would hate for there to be an AI music world and a non-AI music world, both because it doesn't really make sense. There's lots of music that has AI in it that you wouldn't say is AI music. But the other thing is that's just worse for consumers. Like, consumers want to go to one place for their music. And in a world where these things are separate, ultimately the music ecosystem is smaller and less valuable to people. And so I'm actually really excited. And I don't talk about this as deal at all. I think about it much more as partnership, because there is a lot of work to do together that is really forward facing. Like, there's the future of music is not going to build itself. We are going to need to build it with people.
Right. When you talk about you not wanting to see a line between AI and non-AI music, like, what do you mean by that?
Maybe one way to describe that is right now music largely gets discovered on TikTok, and then you go over to another platform like Spotify or YouTube or Amazon or Apple to consume it. And that is a friction point. That is bad for consumers. But I think it would be extra bad for consumers if I literally have to share you content on two different platforms. Like, here's this great song I found. Is it in the AI world or the non-AI world? Like, if these things don't commingle, you just make for crappier end user experiences. And at the end of the day, the dollars in the ecosystem come from the end users. And so it may be uncomfortable to say, because music is art, and it's not only for the benefit of the end user. It is a statement about culture and society and the world. But if we completely forget about delighting the end user, then we are shortchanging the entire ecosystem.
Mm. So is it like AI, it might be used in different ways. Like, we might have, AI artists like Xania Monet. We might have, I don't know, let's say like Taylor Swift, who obviously is not an AI artist, but perhaps is now going to be using AI to be able to allow her fans to collaborate on the music and share that music. But we're not necessarily going to know or care to decipher the difference between, like, which component is AI and which isn't. And it will just be music. Is that kind of like the world that you see?
That is my sincere hope. And I think that the nuance here is that there may be the AI artist, like Xania Monet, and is that AI or is that not? Like, she wrote the lyrics. Like, a lot of that music is made by Nicki. And then you said there's all of the, like, fan derivative content that may be made by AI by Taylor Swift's fans. But, like, there are lots of little bits and pieces of AI music within a lot of the charting songs. And so it becomes impossible, I think, to really draw the line of what is AI and what is not. If the artifacted electric piano in the B section of some extremely popular song was made with Suno, is that AI music? If a vocal effect was added with Suno, or the backup vocals were added with Suno, but the rest was not, is that AI music? And, in some sense, I think we will find it so hard to split these hairs. Like, I think we are better not trying to just label like that's AI or that's not AI, or else at the end of the day, everything is going to get labeled with AI, just like the autotune example that you brought up. Like, I think at this point, probably everything you listen to has autotune.
Right. And in terms of the partnership that you were talking about, and this positive, I guess, shift that we're seeing in record labels, like wanting to collaborate, and like the change, generally speaking, that we're seeing in the music industry, now that you're starting to see like the initial changes happening, how do you see Suno changing to adopt that, whether it's on the model front, whether it's on the business model?
I think you'll see a lot of changes. They will be the model, they will be the business model, they will be the product. I think everything is going to change, and hopefully make a lot of progress. In a very direct way, I think getting to work more with Warner artists is an obvious boon for both sides. It's like, we will benefit, the artist will benefit. Like, that's actually just great for everybody. So It's a little early still to share specifics. This news is like a week old, but
Yeah.
I would stay tuned. There will be a lot of good stuff to share.
Okay, looking forward to it. A couple last questions I wanted to ask. So we talked about, non-AI and AI and like those worlds kind of merging together. What do you think a popular or like I don't think good is the right word, so I'll use the word popular. Like, what do you think a popular artist is going to look like in this new era of music?
It's a really good question. I think about this a lot, and I think it can go in one of a number of directions, because maybe actually very little changes. Because right now, many artists don't write their own songs and aren't terribly involved in the production of their own songs. And in that sense, maybe nothing changes. In another sense, maybe an entirely new class of star emerges next to, not replacing, the current crop of artists. And it's because there are new formats and new media. And I think a lot about YouTube. YouTube did not replace anything, but a new type of star, a new type of YouTube star emerged. Initially, it was like a weird, maybe kooky thing, and eventually you kind of evolve into something like Mr. Beast. And that could be a new type of music star who understands a particular audience well. And I think in that world, you end up with a lot of new, dare I say, weird genres of music that are appealing to smaller groups of people. I attempt not to usually use the word weird, but here I want to connote like different. Like music will evolve much, much faster than it does today under these conditions. And it could be both, so I'm not entirely sure. I think we have to, again, be kind of open-minded about what can come out from these things.
I think like even when we look at the music industry in Japan, I mean, VTubing or VTubers, or like there's a whole like world in Japan of like these virtual artists where like you don't show your face. And now because, 3D modeling and like holograms and all of that has become so advanced that people perhaps who would not have been picked up by record labels because they don't necessarily look the part, but have the musical abilities or have the personality to engage with talents and like actually build a really good business and like a community around that, is generating a ton of revenue, and also just creating a lot of delight for people who are seeking that genre of music or artistry, I guess. So I'm excited to see like how that is going to look like in the AI world and music as well.
I'm excited too, but I will say that what you said is a movie that's actually played out before. That's exactly what happened with digital production. And
right.
You had new people making music, and it was new and it was different music, and new genres came out, and that was all actually just very, very exciting and scary for like a little bit until people realized that it wasn't scary.
Yeah, I feel like change is the only constant, right? There's like always change happening. And like right now, I think it's like because AI is so topical and like highly debated, we're like, oh my God, AI is going to change the music industry. But really, we've seen different versions of that happening throughout history, right? The symphony that you mentioned, like digitizing music, all of that. So yeah, I think we're always changing. Anyways,
yeah,
closing question.
Change is good.
Yeah, change is good. Closing question I wanted to ask you, as someone that's building in the AI space, is if you were an investor, I don't know if you do angel investing or how involved you are, but let's say you're an institutional venture capitalist, what AI company would you be investing in, or what AI space would you be investing in today?
I do a little bit of angel investing. That is a tricky question. I don't mean to be contrarian. I don't think about it as a space per se. I think about it like, I don't even think of us as an AI company. I think about us as a music company. AI is a means to an end. And unless you're like really at, one of the big labs trying to build AGI, like maybe the correct question is like, you should be investing in people that see AI as a means to a completely different future instead of as a means in and of itself, or it's as the ends in and of itself. And in that sense, I think it's nothing new. It's people understanding a space very well and having a distinct vision of what a different future could be, and realizing that it is possible now with a new unlock because there's a new toolkit called AI in order to get there. If you force me to answer, I am a sucker for everything physical. One day I would like to build something in the physical world. I think that's really underrated. I don't want to sell any of my personal investments in this podcast, so I'm not going to mention any of them, but everything physical I just find super, super interesting.
Is there a particular like product or anything in the physical space that you're excited about?
Yes, but again, I don't want to. Let me say stuff that I'm not personally invested in. I think that there are really incredibly non-sexy things that just get overlooked, and I think a lot about like home construction and plumbing and things that are like really, really mundane and haven't changed in 50 years, but aren't particularly good. And I think like my hope is that somebody focuses on those. I have a really fun job, so I don't intend to leave it and go focus on that, but I hope that somebody does. And if you are, get in touch because I would love to talk about it.
Awesome, Mikey. It was so nice talking to you. Thank you so much for sitting down and doing this with us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a ton of fun.